Good morning. So many of the talks that have been given so far have a strong flavor of dynamics. But I'm going to give a different view of the subject with a more flavor of thermodynamics, because I think especially among synoptic meteorologists, there is a tendency to believe that dynamics is more important than thermodynamics. I take an opposite view. I believe that thermodynamics is more important, so I'm trying to convince you that one cannot ignore the thermodynamic constraints that are imposed on the system. Now, the ITCZ that exists around the world, the most well-defined ones on a monthly mean scale are in the East Pacific and Atlantic, and they have been studied very well. Over the Indian region, life is a little more complicated. ITCZ is not staying at one place and moves around, so you get a much more messy picture. But if you are lucky, on any one day, you see some beautiful structure, and this is one example of the ITCZ on the 1st January 2010. And right in the Indian Ocean, you see a absolutely zonally oriented cloud band, almost 60 degrees wide from western to eastern Indian Ocean. And this, of course, keeps moving over a period of time. And so one wants to understand what governs where this ITCZ exists and how it moves. But the focus today lecture will be only on the steady state ITCZ. Now, if you ask what is the zeroth order model of the ITCZ, there is a well-known model of Lindsay-Niggam and that of Gill. Gill's model really was the response of the atmosphere to heating, but one can show that the two are equivalent. So both these models give primacy to dynamics. At the same time, Neil and Held proposed a totally different approach in which the constraints came from thermodynamics. Somehow it has not received the kind of attention that the first two models have received. So I'm going to make a case that it's worthwhile looking at the ITCZ in terms of the thermodynamic constraint. So the basic idea that Neil proposed was that the net energy available to the system from the surface to the top of the atmosphere determines how much mass static energy is imported and then exported out of the system, and it must be in balance. If there is not adequate energy input into the system, then the system cannot sustain itself. And if you look at it from the point of view of the equations, so essentially they wrote down an equation of mass static energy, one for the moisture budget, and note that they neglected all horizontal, and so that was the main approximation there, integrated vertically, and so the vertical integral of mass static energy and the moisture is related to the fluxes at the top and bottom of the atmosphere. And this can be simplified further. You can combine the two equations and argue that rainfall equals the evaporation plus flux at the bottom minus top divided by a quantity called gross moist stability. It is defined right below here. Sorry, not this one. This is dry static stability. I'll go to the next one and come back to this. The gross moist stability is defined as the two integrals that were there in the first equation, and I'm going to modify slightly and define it as delta minus 1, where delta is this quantity. Okay, and the main contention in the first paper that Neil and Held wrote was that JMS was always positive, and based on that argument, if you want a region of convergence, that is where rainfall is above evaporation, then if the denominator is positive, the numerator has to be positive. That was the main constraint he put. And in the case of, if you are in over land region, then the F bottom is, mobile has been removed. I'll put it away. Nothing. Okay. So the main argument in the case of land region, on which I'll focus first, is that the F bottom is approximately 0 because of the low thermal inertia of land. Whatever comes in has to go out within a few weeks. So if you let F given as FTB equal to Q net, and that quantity is measured very accurately by satellite at TOA, and so that makes it easy to verify. So the claim is that if delta is indeed always above 1, then the regions of convergence, that is rainfall evaporation, must be regions with net radiative flux top of the atmosphere being positive. This can be verified. This is what I like about this model in contrast to the other models. It is verifiable, and you look at the net radiation top of the atmosphere in the month of July over the Afro-Asian region, and you see a clear distinction between India and Africa. Africa has either low or negative net radiation top of the atmosphere, while India has a positive value, and so this explains why the driest region in the world is somewhere in Sahara there, and the wettest region is in Cherrapunji on the same latitude. So it can only be explained by the fact that radiation plays a very important role in determining the where IDCZ is. So if you plot the rainfall over Africa, it will all be confined to the region below where the net radiation is high and positive, and as soon as it reaches Sahara, the IDCZ cannot sustain itself there because it cannot, there is no net energy input into the system. Now I took this model further. I made a very simple assumption about the vertical structure of the very simple vertical structure of velocity, a very simple lapse rate, and a simple assumption about the humidity profile. And if you do all that, you can write delta, the dry static stability, in terms of water vapor content we've had. Now I'll show that result. That result is very interesting. It's all over the tropics. We plot that quantity delta, which is the ratio of the dry static energy vertical integral to the moisture. You see it follows a very nice 1 over PVAT formulation, and this goes anywhere between 10 kg meter square to 60. Now this is a specialty of land. Land usually very dry during non-monsoon season and wet monsoon season. You have a huge range of water vapor content. Later on, when I talk about ocean, you will see that we will be there only in the other end of the spectrum. There are not too many oceans with very low water vapor content. So this particular formulation is only for land. So finally, I have an expression for rainfall over monsoonal regions over land in terms of evaporation, net radiative of the atmosphere, and a parameter called C, which is I call a vertical profile parameter, and water vapor content. Now I consider this to be the ideal zeroth order formulation of the monsoon, because it's not a prognostic model, a diagnostic model. It relates the rainfall in monsoonal region in terms of net radiation available, in terms of the vertical structure and amount of water vapor in the vertical column. Now let's see how good this model does in terms of observation. Yeah, the same thing. I just expanded this further in terms of the parameters involved in net radiation, incoming solar and albedo, and outgoing long wave radiation. Now here is a plot of the over a large region. These are all, I know whether you can read it. India is 70 to 90 and 10 to 30. You take 20 or 20 boxes where monsoon exists. You plot the variation of rainfall and what the model predicts for a certain value of C, and you see by and large this model is able to capture the seasonal cycle of rainfall quite well, and one can easily argue in which region. For example, over North Africa, you can see that the net radiation plays a very important role, and hence the rainfall is much lower than either India or South America. So this model is able to give you insight about what controls. As a matter of fact, I use this particular version of the model to do diagnostics of errors in GCMs. When you ask why a GCM is not able to get monsoon rainfall in India correctly, you can now reduce the problem to whether it got the radiation right, QNet, or whether it got the water vapor right, or it got the C, the 3 parameters. And I could show that each of these GCMs which failed had a different kind of problem. And interestingly, although I think this model is valid only for large regions, in this case, even for small regions, 5 by 5 degree boxes, it does well, although slightly you can see there are errors that are there. Now one can see that this model won't work for very small regions because the basic assumption of neglect of advection. The horizontal advection neglect is a very serious approximation. It is surprising that it still works as well as it does. And what I like about this is able to explain the whole rainfall in terms of moisture available. See, normally everybody knew that rainfall is proportional to moisture available. What this method shows is also inversely proportional to moisture because of stability formulation. Now, when I tried to publish this paper, I had a lot of trouble with the referees because in the denominator, if P watt approaches C, it's a singularity. And the referee said the singularity is there, it can't be a right model. Now, partly is right. The singularity is a consequence of the approximation we made. We neglected advection terms and the singularity is coming in. But the singularity is real. You will see later on that the relationship between water vapor and rainfall is nonlinear. This is the linear part, the first part. Second part, nonlinear. And this captures the nonlinearity very well. Although singularity itself is artificial. This is what I want to show you. This is the over India on ECAM Model 5, one of the models used in IPCC. I looked at the rainfall with water vapor for the present climate and future climate, and it shows that clear linear and nonlinear behavior. And also it shows clearly why in the future models of such great, what one might say as variation in prediction. Some models say rainfall will go down, some say it will go up, all because we know that as the global warming occurs, whatever content of atmosphere will go up. That is given, because RH is approximately constant. Given whatever will go up, you would think rainfall will go up. But what this shows is that in the 21st century, the last decade of the 20th century, the stability of the atmosphere has gone up and the entire curve has gone down because C has gone up, the quantity C. So even though water vapor will go up in the 21st century, if the model becomes more stable, then it may rain less than the present. So that's the point that what Nealon calls as up ante mechanism. This is American jargon to imply that it ups the ante, the atmosphere, by being more stable. So this kind of model shows that result very clearly. Now I'll go to work that's been done by my student Vishal Dixit. Now we wanted to extend that to ocean ITCZ. Okay. Now, one would have thought that whatever model which works well over land should work well over ocean. The answer is it does not. Now that's a puzzle because it bothered me because I thought the only approximation that Nealon had made was neglect of horizontal advection. And I thought it should work better over ocean. Surely ocean has a uniform boundary condition. So large regions of Pacific, it should work beautifully. It does not work. Now, to understand that, I didn't want to use reanalysis data because I have great suspicion about reanalysis humidity values. So I'm not sure how good the integrals will work out. And so we decided to use a model. This is the CAM 3.1. And we wanted to do it in a very simple context. So we used the aquaplanet formulation so that there is no complication in the model. Now, many people have done work on the model, and our main focus originally was also on understanding the role played by the cumulus scheme in the model, the Zhang-McFarland scheme. And it has an important parameter called the convective relaxation time tau. And this parameter plays an important role. Right now in the default version it is 1 hour, this relaxation time. And near the end of the talk I'll talk about how it influences the simulation of ITCZ. Now we decided to look at conditions that are prevalent in the Indian region. So we specified 3 different sea surface temperatures. One is the standard aquaplanet configuration of flat profile, which is used routinely by most aquaplanet simulation groups. Then one slightly increasing, which is similar to Bay of Bengal, and one slightly decreasing, which is Arabian Sea. We want to see how sensitive are the model ITCZ location and its dynamics in relation to slight changes in the meridional gradient of SST. Now, this is what aquaplanet simulation people have done. This is from work of Rajendran. And so they specify this very flat SST. And you can see most of them have ITCZ located, 2 of them, right where there's a bend in the curve. That is where the derivative is large. That's a normal one. A few of them have in the middle here, in the flat portion. Majority tend to prefer where the dt dy is fairly large. But our interest is not in our interest is in a slightly more asymmetric profile. Now the reason why we are doing that is this is the alkaplant used by most people, but the ones we are showing here are typical of Bay of Bengal and also West Pacific. Both these increase so we think this is more realistic representation of the SST than this. Now, so we have shown here the three SSTs that we imposed in the model, and the zonal mean, structure of the rainfall minus evaporation, that's a convergence, is shown here. You can see that if it is flat or if it is decreasing SST, there is only one ITCZ near the equator, just out of the equator, while if I give a slightly increasing one, there are two ITCZ here. Okay. And our aim is to understand what determines the ITCZ being here and here, and also later there is time as to how these systems propagate from one to the other. Now this is the one for the Arabian Sea case, that is the SST decreasing with temperature. You can see that the ITCZ is pretty much stuck to the near the equator with no sign of any movement except occasional ones which are there. Now on the other hand, if you give a slightly gradient towards the north, there is a tendency with ITCZ to remain here, but occasionally it goes into a higher latitude but doesn't remain there for long and comes back. Now what is interesting to us is what determines when this ITCZ weakens and that strengthens, and what determines when that weakens and this strengthens. There is almost a flip-flop behavior here, and to us it's worth understanding, and I hope many of the people who are very good mathematics can figure out a very simple model to explain the flip-flop of the ITCZ. Now this is the structure of the case where there are two ITCZ, and what's interesting, this is the zonal wind, and what's interesting is the circulation structure, that there is a slight descent just to the north of the equatorial ITCZ, and this has a role to play in the meridional migration of the ITCZ, this particular feature which is there in this model. Now what we have done here is done the master budget for this model to know the role of advection, and you can see that this is P minus E, and it of course matches closely with the divergence of, because the zonal mean matches very closely with divergence of QV, and if you look at the contribution of V dq dy and Q du dy, of course this this dominates, but this is not negligible. This does play a role at some important points in the system, and so this cannot be totally ignored, as we will see. Now we wanted to know whether we can apply the Neal-Held hypothesis to this ITCZ. That was the main interest, and the initial surprise was that the GMS which Neal-Held claimed will always be positive is not positive. For the equatorial ITCZ, GMS is mostly negative. Okay, so that is the first surprise, and for the off-equatorial mostly it's above always positive value. Now in the literature there are questions about gross Moy stability. It's a vertical integral involving vertical velocity, and there are questions about accuracy of that calculation. That has to be kept in mind, because you are taking vertical velocity, which is somewhat noisy parameter, and multiplying a derivative of Moy static energy. So the answer will be sensitive to how you do the integration. But we believe that in this model, when we do it, it's fairly stable. But remember that when GMS close to 0, there's bound to be error in the calculation. That we'll see now and then. But away from 0, I think calculations are quite reliable. Now the question is, why is the GMS negative in the equatorial ITCZ, and what consequence it has on the Neal-Held hypothesis? Now I just want to show you the GMS structure when you average it over 180 days, and you see that there is a negative GMS right close to the equator, right along all the time, while the rest of the region GMS is positive, except there are these from 30 north occasional negative GMS which we don't fully understand yet. But this we will try to explain why this negative GMS is there in contrast to the positive GMS here. Now another way to examine this problem is in terms of divergence of radiation in the column versus the GMS. Again you see clearly that the equatorial ITCZ has mostly positive QDIV and negative GMS, while the off-equatorial ITCZ between 10-20 knot is mostly positive QDIV, positive GMS. Okay, that's a fundamental difference between these two ITCZ. Now, if you look in terms of convergence, that is P minus E, now the surprising part which needs to be understood is that in spite of GMS being negative, P minus E is positive in this quadrant here. Okay? And that needs to be explained. And on the other hand, the off-equatorial ITCZ, except for a few cases, most of the time P minus E is positive and GMS is positive. That's the issue we want to address. Now here we are comparing, now we are trying to now bring in the role of advection which was not there in the original hypothesis. What we have done here is that the term V dF dy, which is important in the equatorial ITCZ, is brought into this definition here. Let's call it effective QDIV. And this GMS, you can see compared to the previous result, things are moving a little closer to the origin there. Still it is negative, but what you see interestingly is that now most of it is occupied in this quadrant where both QDIV is negative and GMS is negative, this quadrant, and the other quadrant where QDIV is positive, GMS is positive. There are a few points in these two quadrants which don't go with the linear hypothesis. So some of the points close to origin I'm sure are related to the calculation accuracies, but most other points are all quite reliable. So you can see that the horizontal advection of moist static energy does play a role in this region, especially because if you recall that in the profile we have given, which I should have mentioned earlier, the profile we have given, this part has a sharp gradient here. So here we expect V dm dy to play a role, but here it may not be that much. This part you do expect some role played by horizontal advection if the velocity, V velocity is sufficiently large. Yeah, finally we include all advection terms, that is the advection term along with QDIV and one along with the moisture budget. So both in the moisture budget and moist static energy budget we include the advection term. Things are now looking, there are only a few points somewhat off grid here. Most of them are in the first and the fourth quadrant here. And so to me this is an extension of the linear hypothesis, including the meridional advection terms which was neglected in the original formulation. But the more interesting issue is that if you plot the GMS, the gross mass stability, as a function of water vapor content, which looked very nice and elegant in the continental ITCZ, now doesn't look so easy. But I must point out that part of the reason is the way this graph is drawn. There are a few outlier points. If you remove them, actually there's a trend. The trend is not very clear. It's clear here in the case of the equatorial ITCZ. It does go from minus 0.6 approaching 0 here, and here there is a trend, but you don't see it very clearly. But the main point to be remembered is the range of PVAT. Now in the continental ITCZ we have PVAT going from 10 kg per meter squared to 60. Here in the ocean, it is a warm ocean here, mostly between 298 and above. So the water vapor content tends to be always large. So essentially, if you look at this and compare with the previous expression for the continental ITCZ, we are essentially in this portion. That's why we're not able to clearly see any proper functional trend there, because we are mostly here in this region. So whatever we got here, result is not usable in the case of oceanic ITCZ. Okay. Now, if you want to look at how this gross mass stability varies in time, so this average over whole zonal region, and you can see that gross mass stability is essentially negative in the equatorial region, phi south, phi north, positive everywhere, and again a hint of negative at 25 north. And focus of our work right now is to understand why is it negative here and why is it positive here. That is the main focus. And also understand that in spite of negative GMS, an ITCZ can exist here because QD was also negative here in this region. Now, if you look at the vertical structure of omega dm dp, which is the key parameter in GMS, you see that the main difference between the off-equatorial ITCZ and equatorial ITCZ is the large negative contribution coming here, larger than this. And when you take an integral, this tends to dominate over this. While in the off-equatorial ITCZ, this dominates over this. So that's the fundamental difference between the equatorial and off-equatorial ITCZ in terms of the contribution to the GMS. And we get a large negative contribution here, which is causing the integral to be negative. Here we are getting a large positive contribution, which the integral becomes positive. And note the role of that downdraft, which was seen in the picture, has an impact on the GMS contribution. Now, same thing is now shown in terms of vertical structure. You can see clearly that the equatorial contribution goes to much higher altitude. This area is much larger than this area, while for the off-equatorial, this area is much larger than this area. But it is a point you must remember. You are subtracting large positive negative quantities, so the net integral is very sensitive to how you do it carefully or not. That is the issue. Now let's look at the moisture energy profile. You might think that part of the reason why the contribution different is the moisture energy profile is different. The answer is yes, it is different, but not that different. The equatorial ITCZ is somewhat drier in the near the ground, and there is slightly unusual behavior here, which is related to the cumulus scheme used in the model. But I would say that by and large, and the structures are similar. You might not agree with me, but I will show you the other contribution, which is much more different, the contribution omega. Then you may not worry too much about the slight difference that exists here. Now, this is the contribution of dq d by dy qv, that is the moisture convergence term. You see a huge difference between the off-equatorial and the equatorial ITCZ. The equatorial ITCZ has a large positive moisture convergence here and a negative one here, and then nothing there. And the off-equatorial thing has much weaker convergence than the equatorial one. Okay, and this is much better seen in terms of V, not Q. Q somewhat damps out the contribution at the top. Now you see so this omega. Again, omega shows clearly the large vertical velocity close to the ground boundary layer in the equatorial case, which is missing in the off-equatorial case. And so this is the big difference between the two ITCZ. The off-equatorial one does not have such large vertical velocity. But remember, if you look at the original result, the rainfall in the two ITCZ are very similar. They are not very different. But the boundary velocity is very different. Now, this issue has been looked at by Back and Brotherton in a recent paper, in which they looked at the difference. We looked at the difference between equatorial and off-equatorial. They looked at the difference between East and West Pacific, and they argued that the West Pacific vertical velocity structure is more top heavy, while the East Pacific is more bottom heavy. And the explanation of the ITC structure in the East Pacific is related to this difference. And they also argued that this leads to more negative GMS in the East Pacific ITCZ. This is based on reanalysis data, and you can see reanalysis data don't agree with each other. And that's a large cause of concern. If you want to use reanalysis data, you have to be very careful. But one thing is good is that the shape is same in all of them, but the numbers are very different. And so if you calculate GMS with these three different reanalysis data sets, you'll get three different answers. So that is still an issue which we have to worry about. Now this is the dV/dy, which is what I think is really interesting. dV/dy in the equatorial ITCZ shows a strong convergence here, a divergence here, and a divergence there. And the off equatorial shows a divergence and convergence with almost nothing middle. This green one is a classic Charney exposition, which if you all recall in the Morrell's book, he had a beautiful derivation of the two boundary layers, one near the ground, one near the tropopause, and the off equatorial ITC follows that model very closely, but the equatorial one does not. And we are not fully understood why it has to diverge so close to the boundary layer so much. That still needs to be examined, but this difference is very clear in the model. And what we have seen is also pointed out by Back and Petherton in a recent paper using reanalysis data, and they do PCA modes and so on, and they show one mode, this d omega dp, which is same as dV/dy really, and they show that there's one mode which goes like that, another mode which goes like this. So this is the mode of equatorial in our case, and this is the mode of the equatorial. Very similar structure. So what we have found for the Indian Ocean SST conditions are quite similar to what Back and Petherton found, and they were only focusing on the East Pacific mainly. So the point they have made, this is from their paper, that assuming vertical velocity profile MSC is almost same, the vertical profile of vertical velocity plays a crucial role in determining the GMS essentially, that is how much is exported and imported. So if the vertical velocity is above the MS minima, it has one impact. If it's below, it has another impact. Okay? So in our case, this is what happened in the equatorial ITCZ. The vertical velocity had a maxima below the MSC maxima, while off equatorial ITCZ has one above. In their case, it is East and West Pacific. In our case, it is North and South. Same logic essentially. Now, the point I wanted to make here was that the first term is including the advection term, the PMNSE and the advection term. The second term involves the energy budget, QDIV, and the advection term, and along with GMS. And we showed clearly that only in the equatorial region GMS goes negative. All other regions is positive, and this is mainly related to the nature of the vertical structure of the vertical velocity in this region. That is what really is ultimately controlling it. So the final modification of the Neal-Naidoo hypothesis would be that instead of saying PMNSE is QD by GMS, we have to include the role of horizontal advection moisture and the horizontal advection of moisture static energy on each side. And this becomes more prominent when you do zonal averaging, because once you do zonal averaging, you can take care of all variation in the x direction. So the y direction effects do play an important role. And this follows from the general formulation now, in which we include the horizontal advection as a part of this. So this comes here, and this comes here, and so as a matter of fact, it's interesting. One could have incorporated these in the GMS document also, but I think because GMS was defined originally, one doesn't want to change it. We modify the QDIV and we modify the PMNSE to include the advection term. Now, what we are looking now is at the different behavior of the ITCZ in the aquaplanet simulation in CAM3, between where tau was given as originally all the work done so far, I presume is what tau equals 1 hour, where the ITC jumps between equator, off equator and comes back. But as soon as you make tau 12 hours, it starts propagating very regularly outwards. And we have not yet understood what is the factor which causes this difference, and we believe is related to, tau is the, I talked about the Zhang-McFarlane scheme, where the Cape consumption rate. Yeah. If you want, I'll just go back. Yeah, it was that. I put it right at the beginning. Yeah, it was 2, yeah, this one. dA by dt, Cape is A by tau. So that tau affects the simulation very closely. Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah. So the present our work that we are focused on is to explain the sudden jump, abrupt jump in the ITCZ in the case of tau equals 1 hour, and a much more smooth continuous variation of the meridional propagation here, and why that difference occurs. And as a matter of more interesting, we would like to know why the switch occurs. Because if you have seen some recent work, many people have argued that even in the observation, ITCZ switches rather suddenly. It doesn't go smoothly. And I think that's there in the next one, I think. Yeah. So this is slightly partly contrived. You choose the latitude of maximum trim rainfall, the only average, and plot it, and you see that if you believe that ITCZ is driven by the sun is moving very slowly with season, but the ITCZ very sharply jumps and then again retreats very sharply. And the question is, how do we understand this in the context of our model? So one has to appeal to either a sudden change in the energy available, or in the, I think more importantly probably, change in the gross mass stability. Otherwise, I don't see how one can explain such a sharp transition in a matter of few days. So this is thing I think worthwhile looking at, and this model of ours is able to get part of this behavior, but it doesn't remain there, it comes back. That's another issue. So we want to understand what causes it to flip over to this side, and what keeps it there, and what again makes it flip back. And we believe that if we once understand this, we'll be able to explain why in the other case it moves more smoothly. Yeah, one reason we have already identified, which is related to what all I have discussed, is that in the case of tau equals 1 hour, what I discussed mostly in this lecture, there is a dip in the humidity. This is the boundary humidity in the model. This is the equatorial ITCZ, off equatorial, and there is a sudden dip, which is not there in the 12-hour case. And we believe that that is what is allowing this to move smoothly here and move rather abruptly here. So that is the present hypothesis, not fully examined. It needs to be examined further. So let me come to conclusion here. So what we have shown is that the continental ITCZ, the monsoons, can be explained fairly in a diagnostic way with a simple net hypothesis. But when you come to oceanic ITCZ, we need to include horizontal advection terms to be able to explain using the same hypothesis. Thank you. Huh? Yes, yes it does. Yeah. The question is how is the question is not fully understood now. Yes, it is changing it. Yeah, it is changing perspective. It does. Yeah. The question is how is what we are trying to understand.
A very nice question. Charlie used to say, ITCZ is always located over a radiative source region, and deserts are radiative seas. Now, when you come to this complicated oceanic ITCZ, it still is over a radiative source region, isn't it? Or not?
No. As a matter, if you look at, I don't know how you define radiative source. If you look in terms of Q div, the divergence of the flux, now things are a little more complicated. You see that in the model, the equatorial ITCZ is located over a sink region, sink region, But that's because it's importing mass starting energy, not exporting. See, that is the one which is very counterintuitive. I would not have expected it, but for what the model is saying. If you look at the original model of Neil Health, you need a heat source to make sure that you can export so much of mass static energy. But if the vertical profile of omega is such that you can import mass static energy, you can afford to be deficit region. That is the point.
It's very intriguing. So it's somewhat similar to heat flow, where you have vertical velocity only up to about 700 millibar, but here you have ascent throughout the profile.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very intriguing solution, the so-called oceanic identity. Because it is somewhat different from the canonical identity.
Yes. Yeah, I would say. We didn't expect that. I would argue that, yeah.
See, you have certain parameters.
Yes.
They're taken from observation, or
Which model you're talking about?
the one you started with, for example,
yeah.
the precipitation.
Yeah. In the first linear hypothesis,
And its
as far as possible, we try to use observation because our aim is diagnostics, not prognostics. So we took QNet from satellite data and water vapor satellite data as far as possible. I remember at that time when I did the work, if I did not use satellite data, the reanalysis data of net it was so poor, the entire theory went wrong. If you took QNet from NSUP or ERA at that time, now it may have changed, the numbers are, because clouds are wrong, numbers are wrong. So you have to stick to actual observation.
So when you actually compare the precipitation in your model,
Yeah.
observation,
Yeah.
what parameters go into the
In my model, I take the satellite measured net rate of the atmosphere. I take satellite measured water vapor content. Evaporation, I take from reanalysis. I have no other reliable source. And a constant C, you can call it tuning parameter. It can be calculated, but it's not very accurate. From C is tuned, essentially. That number C, which is a measure of the vertical profile of the two, that is given a fixed number like 85 or so. That's a tuned parameter. Because
it is largely therefore a diagnostic.
yeah, it's only a diagnostic. It is not meant to be of any predictive value. But to me, it gives a lot of insight as to what are the important parameters. That's all. It doesn't. Yeah. But it's not predictive value.
It's a bit of a comment, but I did a study like that in 2004 using an axisymmetric GCM.
Yeah.
And where you have basically SST force of the equator.
Yeah.
And you get this type of behavior where you have the main ITCZ over the warm SST and generating a secondary ITCZ at the equator on the winter side.
Yeah.
The reason for that is essentially that the second ITCZ is forced, but when you have an ITCZ of the equator, you have dominantly easterly wind in the equatorial region, which give you that mechanically forced convergence at the equator. And that's basically when the mechanism we agree in the paper that is controlling that second ITCZ. So the first...
Now, what was the specified SST profile in that case, in your case?
So I played around, but it was really simple cosine of the equator.
Cosine of the equator, okay.
Yeah, so you have main thermodynamically forced SST ITC over the warm water, and then mechanically forced SST basically at the equator. Where what happens is that you have the cross-equatorial outflow, inflow of the alley circulation is stopped at the equator, and that gives you that ascent and second zone of convection. And so I wonder if you looked at a paper and if some of these mechanisms apply in your simulation.
No, I don't think we did. Right? We have not looked at the 2004 paper.
Actually, if it is forced by convergence, our SST gradients are not explaining the net convergence ITC. If it is cosine, the SST should explain the net convergence ITC, right? The gradients of SST should explain the net convergence.
Well,
in your case, in the cosine profile.
But if you're talking about the Linzen-Ingham argument, the Linzen-Ingham argument does not apply for the meridional circulation, because you have the alley circulation, which is not directly forced by SST, by the local SST gradient. But there is, I mean, we can talk about the paper later.
We can talk about it later. Yeah.
Sure.
There are some studies with the trim data sets where people have looked at the fractions of the convective and non-convective type clouds, which have totally different thermal structures.
Yeah.
In the context of equatorial and off-equatorial ITCZ, I think you would find different heating profiles because of those fractions which come into play.
Okay. Means Stratocom versus convective?
Yeah, the fractions are somewhat different.
Okay.
Near equatorial versus off-equatorial.
Okay.
I can give you that.
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to ask you about omega. In the reanalysis and CAM model, and basically in all models, omega is a diagnostic quantity, right? I think
yes.
Obtained from the thermodynamical equation. So the fact that you get omega and precipitation at the same place, collocated, is it related to the fact that omega is a diagnostic quantity, or is it really so in the nature that omega and precip are really collocated?
Let me explain. One advantage of saying the ratio of the two quantities is the actual magnitude of omega is irrelevant. It will cancel out. It is the shape of omega. You are right. Shape of omega is required. But the actual value of omega is not relevant because it is there in both numerator and denominator. That's why the ratio is so important. You are taking omega dm dp by omega dq dp. So where the peak is and how much the peak is not relevant. Where the peak is relevant. That is comes from diagnosis, doesn't come from the model.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Okay.
It comes from the diabatic term, from the model.
Okay, we'll thank Professor Srinivasa for giving a wonderful talk. The next speaker is Professor J.B. Nanjandaiah.